This press conference on Zoom will be recorded, audio and video recorded this morning. I want to welcome everybody to this joint press conference of the Frederick County Cybercrime Task Force. I'm Will Cockey, the Communications Specialist for the State's Attorney's Office. I want to welcome our speakers this morning, State's Attorney Charlie Smith, Chief Counsel Joyce King, Frederick County Sheriff Chuck Jenkins, Frederick Police Lieutenant Andrew Alcorn, Maryland State Police Lieutenant Matthew Kale, FBI Supervisory Special Agent Matt Vilcek, and Homeland Security Investigations Special Agent Jeff Stewart, and also other members of the FCCCTF Task Force. Also, for members of the media joining us, and I know there are still some that are joining now, if you could please leave your name and organization in the chat so we can just follow up with you. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to State's Attorney Charlie Smith for our presentation. Charlie?
Wonderful. Thank you, Will. I appreciate that. I'm still clicking and admitting people into the waiting room, so hopefully they're getting in to see our joint press conference. I do want to thank all of our partner agencies with regard to the task force. Obviously, without the federal, state, and local participation, we wouldn't be able to prosecute these people. So let's get on with it. Again, this is our joint task force. It was established in May of 2019. Frederick County's always had a very strong presence with regard to internet crimes against children prosecution. We prosecuted Maryland's very first ICAC task force case back in 1999. And so we really pride ourselves on continuing to work hard to bring to light both the issues that we see with regard to internet child sexual exploitation and to prosecute those individuals. So here's a little bit of our progress timeline since the establishment of our task force. You can see once again, we established it in May 2019. Immediately, all of the investigative agencies, all of the law enforcement agencies, which you'll hear from later, began an undercover chat operation that yielded 7 defendants that traveled to Maryland to have sex with minors. So 7 travelers cases immediately, but that's not where that's where we started, but certainly not where we stopped. You can see that we've worked hard in terms of legislative changes, both in 2019 and 2020, and hopefully in 2021. We prioritized our failure to register cases. A lot of jurisdictions do not take failure to register seriously. I can assure you that our local law enforcement takes that very seriously. We at the State's Attorney's Office, we have prioritized those. We assign them to felony prosecutors because we believe that they're ultimately going to result in future felony cases, which we'll talk about. Again, you could see we've engaged in further undercover chat operations, which we'll touch on briefly. In terms of those legislative and advocacy gains, you could see that in October 2019, we added key language, lascivious exhibition, to the current child pornography statute. That was a huge win for us in Maryland and locally in Frederick County. The old statute really allowed people to view and capture what we believe to be child pornography. But because of the antiquated language about state of sexual arousal, et cetera, what was obviously child pornography did not fall within the definition of the old statute. So we had that changed to fall in line with the federal statute, quite frankly. And so we're going to enhance our prosecution and investigation with this new language. Additionally, another sort of loophole was a situation where we did not have an actual minor. We had minors that were basically computer generated. They were indistinguishable from actual children, but did not fall within the statute. So we were able to change that as well. We did also expand the current sexual solicitation of a minor law to include prohibition of sexual solicitation through their parent. So the old law, again, you had to directly solicit a minor for sex, which exempted those who were soliciting sort of the bad dad or the live-in boyfriend type of situation. So we were able to change that as well. And then finally, we are going to, hopefully, Joyce King is spearheading this, as she has so many other initiatives. We are going to change the Maryland State Sentencing Commission guidelines on sentencing these offenders. So a lot of these offenders receive merely probation before judgment, which is akin to those who are shoplifting, in my opinion. So we need to increase the sentencing guidelines for child pornography, and we're going to be working hard on that. As you'll hear from our sheriff, from our federal law enforcement partners as well, we are responding to a national crisis. 106% increase, 106%. You're talking about under 1 million reports as of March 2019, increased a year later to over 2 million. And that is pre-COVID. You're talking about a statistic in March 2020. You can see a dramatic increase thus far we have seen locally, and I'm sure you'll hear from our federal partners as well. They've seen that on a federal level since March. You have a situation where we talked with regard to the need for children to get back in school personally, because kids report to those that they trust. They're not reporting because this is occurring a lot of times in-house, so to speak, at home, but they report to teachers, they report to counselors, they report to coaches. So once they get back to school, I really believe you're going to see a huge increase in reporting of regular child abuse cases, as well as suspected child exploitation cases. Those are the numbers from Maryland Cyber Tips and Frederick Cyber Tips. So you can see big numbers. We locally have tripled the number of child sexual exploitation prosecutions in Frederick. Again, many, many thanks to our federal, state, and local partners. Couldn't do it without them. And I look forward to hearing from them in a little bit. These are just a few examples of our increased proactive investigations. You can see that you have people who are like Harrington, for example, reoffending in Pennsylvania when released from Frederick. He posed as a 15-year-old boy in a chat room and persuaded a 12-year-old girl to meet with him in a park where he lured her into a van. So you can see very serious investigations and prosecutions. I mean, Thompson bringing a small child with him when he solicited sex from an undercover minor, just crazy types of cases that we're seeing that shock really the conscience, which is just further evidence of the need for our cybercrime task force. Increased federal collaboration has been very key. I'm sure Matt Vilcek will address that in a little bit, but the number of federal prosecutions have gone up, thanks in part to local law enforcement and local prosecutors, because they have increased sentencing guidelines. You've seen something in Maryland where first-time offenders are getting a probation before judgment. Not so in the federal system. They're getting mandatory minimums of like 5 to 10 years. Same thing with our registry and supervision. You're talking about someone here in Maryland, in Frederick County, their maximum supervision on probation could be 5 years, whereas in the federal system, it could be a lifetime registry and supervision. And of course, they have increased resources. You know, the Frederick Police Department, Stu Alcorn's here, Chuck Jenkins, our sheriff, can talk about their collaboration with HSI and FBI and what they bring to the table in terms of enhanced technical services and additional resources. Next slide. Just a couple of examples of federal cases. You can see that Hassan case. Here's a guy who was a former federal Foreign Service officer sentenced to 40 years in federal prison, who sexually abused at least 5 minors while he was stationed overseas. And then you can see also another prosecution there, Jake Patterson, sentenced to 150 months in federal prison. He basically posed as a 16-year-old girl and was soliciting young men, young boys, to engage in sexual conversations and give sexual pictures of themselves to him. So a substantial sentence for that individual. So basically what we wanted people to know, wanted the press to know and the public to know, is that we really are raising the bar. We take it very seriously here in Frederick County. We have been the point of contact for statewide legislative changes and for statewide prosecutions and federal prosecutions. And we're going to continue to do so because of our cybercrime task force. you could see that 75% of these offenders are in a position of trust, according to one expert. According to another, you can see that the rate of increase for admitting to contact offenses, not child pornography, not simple child pornography, but those arrested for child pornography, after polygraph, nearly 60% of these people admit to having sexual contact or contact with a minor at a minimum. So you can see as again that many professionals believe, many experts believe that treatment plans do not cure, they just contain the behavior. As some would say, they're hardwired for offenses against children, for their sexual drive is that for children. So who is being abused? 78% are children under 12. 78%, nearly 80% are young children, very young children. And they're being abused by people that they know, that they love, that they respect, and, you know, or did respect, that, or that were neighbors or a family friend. Or you could see only really 18% stem from online enticement from strangers. So these are people that they know. And then our final slide before we invite others to speak is a statistic from the FBI. And it's one that we believe is shocking. 500 to 750,000 sexual predators active on the internet in any given day. So again, we wanted to have this joint press conference to highlight our accomplishments here in Frederick County, both in terms of local and federal prosecutions. And so at this point in time, you've probably heard enough from me. I am going to turn the mic over, so to speak, to, I believe, Sheriff Chuck Jenkins wishes to be our next speaker, if I'm not mistaken. So Sheriff, thank you for attending, and I will again turn the mic over to you.
Thank you, Charlie. Good morning. Charlie, thank you, and Joyce also for your efforts in this, going back to putting this task force together. The state's attorney's office was the driving force. We all recognize the need to be involved in this locally through local law enforcement, county, city, and state. I will say this, the need has been there for years. The need continues to grow. We're definitely committed to this cybercrime task force. I think over 18 months, you've had tremendous results so far. It's allowed you all to do a much more effective job in prosecution. And I think we're seeing the results now. In time, as this grows, and the problem will grow, obviously, it's so much different, Charlie, than when you and I worked together on these cases more than a decade ago, maybe 15 to 20 years ago. The whole dynamic has changed. There's a different type of predator out there. The men and women who investigate these crimes are very good at what they do. They're diligent, highly effective. And again, all the agencies involved, not just my men and women, but all the other law enforcement agencies. You talked about the collaboration with HSI.
General,
What allows us to perform the way we do, the federal resources, the assistance, the technology, the equipment, all the things we need to be more effective, to let you go forward with a more effective and stronger prosecution. I think it's all in place. So very, very tremendous effort so far over 18 months. And I think in time, we're only going to get better at it. So the other thing I can say that I foresee us over time adding more investigators to our unit. Right now, we've got, I think, 4 up there. I see this growing to maybe double the size in the next couple of years. So you have our commitment. We're a part of it. So I thank you for being the driving force.
Thank you, Sheriff. I think we'll stay local and kind of move our way up. Stu Alcorn, Frederick Police Department, thank you for attending.
Oh, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And again, just to reiterate what the sheriff said, thank you, Joyce and the state's attorney's office, Charlie, for kind of spearheading all this. We're at Frederick Police Department, we're very appreciative for the partnerships that we've developed through the task force. These partnerships with FBI, HSI, they've allowed us to recover more evidence that we may not have been able to recover, and led to those successful prosecutions, given everyone, especially the state's attorney's office, the evidence that we need to move forward. We, like the sheriff said, we know there's much more work out there. We're committed to this task force. We're committed to making these types of cases a priority. And really, we just look forward to protecting the children within our jurisdiction and the prosecution of the offenders of these types of cases.
Thank you. We'll move on to Maryland State Police. I know Maryland State Police has had a commitment to the ICAC task force for many, many years. Worked closely with Barry Lee, so I think was the first member of the ICAC task force back in the late 90s. So we'll move on. Matt Kale, thank you also for attending. I see you're muted, so if you could unmute. Thank you, sir.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. State, local, and federal law enforcement, along with our state and federal prosecutors, work tirelessly on a daily basis to combat child exploitation throughout the state of Maryland. I would like to thank all of our partners for their support and continued commitment to this unwavering partnership. In addition, Governor Hogan's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth, and Victim Services, the Maryland State Legislature, and our federal partner, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, have been instrumental in funding the ICAC program. The ICAC program is a success because of the relationships and the ability to work together and combat this ongoing problem. In 2019, the Maryland ICAC received about 3,200 cyber tips for the entire state. In 2020, as of Friday, December 4th, we've received 5,422 cyber tips for the entire state. Our tips are up almost 2,200 year to date, and the year's not over yet. So the work is definitely growing. Officers, troopers, deputies, federal law enforcement, we're being taxed every day to investigate these cases. There's no shortage of work, and these men and women in law enforcement, our prosecutors are doing an outstanding job in trying to effectively fight this. I offer people to visit our Maryland ICAC Facebook page, also to visit the Maryland State Police homepage. Down on the left-hand side under Citizen Services, a link to the Maryland ICAC. We have a informational page there with tips for parents. You can also ask for a presentation. Our community outreach has still continued under COVID. We've been able to do things virtually. So if there's a need for a presentation in a school to do it virtually, we can still accommodate that. And I want to thank everybody for their support.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. I think a common thread you've heard from our state and local law enforcement thus far is really the need for resources. We can work, they could probably work around the clock nonstop with regard to fighting child sexual exploitation on the internet. And that's why, each of the local and state partnership with our federal partnership has been so critical, is they do bring additional resources and additional expertise, even with regard to items such as cell phone encryption and whatnot. And so one of those federal partners is Matt Vilcek with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Matt's been committed to this cause for many years as well. So Matt, again, thank you for attending virtually. So I see you're muted as well. If you could please unmute, maybe speak to the press.
Sure. I'd first like to again thank you and your office, Frederick County State's Attorney's Office, for spearheading this tremendous task force. I'd like to thank the Frederick Police Department, the Frederick County Sheriff's Office, State Police, and our federal partners with HSI, Homeland Security, for participating in this tremendous effort. In the midst of this pandemic and virtual schools, the scary truth is online predators are more active now than they ever have been. We've experienced a tremendous increase in the number of cyber tips and other complaints coming in with regard to either child sexual abuse or sextortion or other types of crimes where children are vulnerable and being exploited. The National Center itself, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, I should say, in March of 2019, just to highlight this, they had about 983,000 cyber tips that came in March 2019. This year, in March 2020, over 2 million cyber tips came in. So that sort of highlights the importance and the extent of the problem. So this is why it's so important to have task forces like this one with Frederick City, Frederick County, Maryland State Police, our other federal partners, joining together, pooling resources and pushing forward to combating this very serious problem. I wish I could say that it was going to be going away, but it's going to be here, and we need to continue to fight it. So I'd just like to again express our thanks to our partners. The FBI is only as strong as our partnerships, and we appreciate the diligent work that's being done to open more doors for law enforcement to be proactive instead of reactive in these cases. So thank you again.
Thank you, Matt. Again, our other federal partner, in addition to FBI, is HSI, Homeland Security. And I believe we have David Snyder, who's the RAC. He's a resident agent in charge. Mr. Snyder, are you on? I don't hear him speaking. So in any event, we do want to thank HSI. They do, again, as I previously spoke to, bring resources to the table. They collaborate very closely with our Frederick County Sheriff's Office, and we're thankful for them being a partner to the Cybercrime Task Force. So I guess at this point in time, I am going to, we have press partners. Matt, Will, I'm going to kick it back to you to let you sort of coordinate whether they're chatting with you or not, what kind of questions they have. So I'm going to mute up and, or actually I'll stay unmuted, but I'll let you go ahead and take it from here.
Great, thank you so much. I just wanted to ask all of our panelists first before we open it up to a full question and answer session. What you have seen this year as far as this increase of cyber tips in a time when so many children are going to school online, they're not physically in school during this COVID period. Maybe I'll start with State's Attorney Charlie Smith, and then we'll go down the list.
Well, I think as I touched previously, we have a big concern, really, not only the increased time that they're spending online, everything's virtual, but really the underreporting for us is what I think is going to be troubling. I really do believe that once kids go back to school, you're going to see a huge spike in reporting once they get back to the coach that they trust, the counselor that they trust, the teacher that they trust. I think you're just going to see a big jump in reports here after the turn of the year.
I'll go to Sheriff Jenkins next.
We've actually seen an overall increase of about 20% in reporting these types of crimes and an increase overall in incidents during the whole period of 2020. That's why, from my perspective, we're going to need more investigators sooner than later.
Thank you, sir. Lieutenant Alcorn.
Agreed with both what Charlie and the sheriff said. And one thing we need to keep in mind here too is the younger generations, they're much more savvy with internet technology and these types of things than we are. Even all the trainings that we are able to go to, they just inherently are better at handling themselves on TikTok or doing things like that than we are. So, we try to stay ahead of that with trainings and things like that. But yeah, I think we're going to see a jump in reports, and I think the continued efforts and increasing the numbers on the Cybercrime Task Force specifically will help us combat this crime.
Thank you, sir. Lieutenant Kale from Maryland State Police.
Yes, as I spoke of earlier, the tips for the entire state are up over 2,200 for the year, and we're not finished yet. And we see the number of complaints continue to increase in reference to child exploitation. We have the cases involving the chat cases or the solicitation style cases are on the rise also. So it's cutting across all categories of what we're looking at here.
Thank you, sir. And finally, Supervisory Special Agent Bill Check.
Well, in addition to the partnerships that we enjoy here in Frederick, one of the challenges of our office is that we cover, as an office here in Baltimore, all of Maryland and Delaware for our area of responsibility. And these cases don't just sit here. They span, they go across different states, they go international. And so these types of partnerships are so important to have and to be able to rely on each other, not only for assistance in a physical manner, but also with expertise. Frederick City brings a very unique talent to the coalition. The county, state police, HSI, everybody pulling their resources together is so important to combat this problem that, unfortunately, as you saw in some of the case material that was presented earlier with the state's attorney's office, their great work in prosecuting these cases don't just sit here, they go elsewhere as well. So these partnerships are very important to combat that, not only just locally, but also nationally and globally.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up to questions from the media now. If you could just go ahead and unmute yourself with your question and just state your name and the organization that you are with, please.
Hi, this is Mary Grace Keller with the Frederick News Post. Thanks for having me. I was wondering, how did the results of that first 18 months of the Cybercrime Task Force working together, how did that differ from your expectations, if at all? I guess that would be to any member of the group.
Joyce King, do you want to handle that for us?
Absolutely. I think we have exceeded our expectations. I knew that coming together with all this talent and resources, we would definitely have a productive turnout, but we've definitely exceeded our expectations, especially with the legislative work. I have so many thank yous to our partners as well as to the local legislators for all their support and understanding the importance of this problem, this pandemic, international pandemic. And a lot of the movement we were able to make in legislation has really helped us be better prosecutors, better investigators. And I think that the other thing that that exceeded my expectations was the commitment of every investigator a part of this task force, from our computer forensic examiners to our FBI agents, but HSI special agents, their commitment, time and commitment. I mean, they work tirelessly, and the images that they have to look at, data and the public will never really comprehend. Most attorneys, judges will never have to see, and these individuals are looking at these images to try to rescue children every single day.
Expanding on that, thank you for your answer. How did the numbers differ from your expectations? Did you expect this 106% increase? Obviously, we didn't know the pandemic was coming, so that was probably a factor. But did we expect to see such high numbers after this amount of work being put in?
No, we definitely were not anticipating the high volume, which I'm so happy to hear. Every agency's continued commitment to add additional resources, additional investigators. These are time-consuming cases. And the volume and numbers of cyber tips, we were not anticipating such a spike, obviously, like you said, due to COVID, but I think just also the nature of the evolving and progressive nature of the internet. I think most teenagers and even preteens are on the internet, and it's just a limitless population of potential victims.
Great. Any other questions? All right. Well, I want to thank everyone again for joining us this morning for this joint press conference. Feel free to reach out if you have additional questions later today. Thank you to our law enforcement leadership and as well as the members of the press for joining us today. Thank you and have a good morning.
Thank you.